Welcome to Difficult Conversation Africa broadcast. I present to you the host, Yinka Olaito.
Job, identity, border, and Ubuntu. These have been some of the controversial issues that are becoming very important discussion with the South Africa immigration tensions that is going on. South Africa used to be a power hub of economic activities in Africa, where every African can find safety, especially post-apartheid regime from the 90s. South Africa opened its border to everybody across Africa so they can be part of their new identity, because most of African countries did invest into the freedom that South African citizens now enjoy. The fact remains that what happens recently, particularly in the last 1.5 months, with regards to South Africa immigration tension and debate associated with it, has remained a concern. And then when you look about Ubuntu, South African word, which is Ubuntu, I am because you are, we begin to ask questions. Is Ubuntu under pressure with this South African immigration tension? Welcome to Difficult Conversation Africa, where we discuss issues that many are afraid to discuss. And today we are looking at Ubuntu. South Africa immigration tension. Is Ubuntu under pressure? There are several questions we need to ask ourselves as in this platform. And some of the issues that are coming up, there are myths that have been raised. The first question is the fact that South Africa are suffering because of undocumented immigrants. The first conversation was around undocumented immigrants. But what has transpired in the last 1 month with March and March, Jacinta, and every other person that is leading that, it has gone beyond what is called undocumented immigrant. There are very many people who are documented immigrants that have been affected. People have been killed. A lot of things has happened. And when you look at this as an individual, from a South African perspective, they felt that most of the infrastructure are under pressure because other African countries, citizens are taking over jobs, hospital, housing, and other infrastructure, schools, that there's too much pressure on the limited resources that South Africa government can actually afford. The question is, if truly, can we say that immigrants are the people taking their jobs? Because statistics have shown that most of the immigrants, particularly most of the undocumented, are not involved in formal sector. They are always in the informal sector where they start something on their own and they start building their own life. Argument has also been there for South Africa that most of those undocumented immigrants are responsible for crimes. Does immigration equal crimes? Do immigration increase crime in South Africa? It has been shown that the statistics are there to show that, yes, while some immigrants are involved in drug and crime and all of that, and some of the nations that have been pointed at mostly are that Nigeria are most famous around that thing. The question is, when you look at that statistics, the number of Nigerians in South Africa is minimum compared to other African nations that are present in South Africa. Now, if you look at crime, that immigration has increased crime because of undocumented. What about the documented individuals that are there that have been affected? Because the sing song is now moving from just undocumented to everybody should leave and that everybody should go back to their country. The question is, in the midst of this, South Africa Ubuntu word, which is we have because I am, or you have because we are, is it under pressure? Africa and South Africa believe in Ubuntu, where you are supposed to be your brother's keeper. But to what extent? That's the question some people have asked. That what extent is Ubuntu when I, as an indigene, cannot even feed, I cannot properly live within my community in peace? What is happening in South Africa today? Does it validate Ubuntu? Why is there too much emotional attachment to issue of immigration and border now? Arguments are there, even though unconfirmed, that these had been the level of attack and the tension is beyond what an ordinary person or a leader of a group can also or can affirm. That the possibility is that this action is a state backed action by government. Malema, the chief commander-in-chief of EFF, Economic Frontier Force, one of the political parties within the South Africa, had maintained that this is more than ordinary, that this is a state-backed action. Number two, now the other factor that we want to raise is this: the issue of corruption within the system, which has allowed the situation to degenerate to what it is. How much of that have been resolved by South Africa? Yes, every country or every indigene has a right to lay claim to what they believe in, what they're supposed to do, and what not to be done. But the question is, why has immigration become such an emotional issue in this time? There are other arguments to say that the election is coming, and because the election is coming, the government is trying to be diplomatic in order to ensure that they do not lose election in the next in the election year. But the question is, the challenge we have seen with this immigration issue is that, unlike what has happened, people had pointed to us that, okay, Ghana did the same thing. They said Nigeria must go in 1968, and then Nigeria did the same thing in the 80s. The diplomatic role that we saw in those incidents that were cited is the fact that it's one country that was faced with Ghana issue. It was Nigeria. With Nigeria issue, it was only Ghana. But the immigration issue that is going on right now in South Africa is beyond one country. And the question is, can South Africa survive without every other African nation? A glimpse of what happened at the World Cup when South Africans were playing against Mexico was enough to show a pointer that the fact remains that when you cut off from your neighbors and every other person that is close to you, at the time when you have trouble, who will be there for you? South Africa cannot live individually alone. There are other arguments that other countries in Africa that have been affected should also seek redress and ask for compensation. Unfortunately, recently, last week, one of the ministers has said that there's no compensation for anybody because they were not the one who initiated, South Africa was not the one who initiated the repatriation, that each country had done their own repatriation. And specifically, the minister actually mentioned that there's no compensation for everybody, and especially for Nigerians, where they think that most of the drug issues and the housing issues or whatever housing that an average Nigeria has is something that is harboring drug. The fact remains that, yes, she maintained the fact that houses that are bought legally and cars that are bought legally can be resold. The question is, in terms of Ubuntu, what is happening? How will South Africans survive in a situation where there's an event on anything or there's an attack on South Africa? Will Ubuntu survive if now South Africans, both individual and government, are really doing this to other African nations? With the issue of employment, because that's an issue that have been raised, that most of the either undocumented or documented migrants are the ones taking South African jobs. We have analyzed this. Statistics have shown that most of non-documented residents in South Africa, they are always informal in other petty jobs, running their shop and all of those things. Now, the indications are there, and we might not conclude yet because there's no data to support that Now that some of these non-documented migrants are left, the shops have been closed and the jobs have not been created. Then other thing we want to raise, why is this immigration issue targeted at black alone? Because it has been shown that the number of whites in South Africa is also significant. South Africa has something like 53 or maybe between 53 and 63 million population. Other African immigrants within the nation, they do not constitute up to 20 or 30% of the population. So are we saying that only 20% of non-documented or immigrants in South Africa are taking all the jobs that are? Are there no reason why we should also point into inefficiency in government? Unemployment is not just a South Africa issue. I think it is everywhere. Unemployment is across Africa due to bad governance and some other thing like that. The other thing we want to discuss as we begin to close is that, like we said, does migration always increase crime? There are other nations across the globe that migration do not increase. Yes, America was talking along that line that they need to vote, they need to create border and all of that. As we look at all these issues, border, identity, jobs, unemployment, and Ubuntu, how long will it be long for South Africa to realize that even if they chase every non-South African out of their country, except few things are resolved, except the issue of governance, unemployment, and others are resolved, we are not good. The issue will not be resolved. I appeal now to South Africa, why we must say that they have a right to own their country and to lead their country the way they want to lead. It's also important for South Africa and its governance and leadership to understand that there's always, when you actually punish your neighbor because of what is happening in your house, a time will come when you will need that labor. And as I close for this one, some of the things that I want to say, today's conversation has reminded us that migration is not just simply about border, it is about people, it's about livelihood, and it's more than just meet the high. There are a lot of issues that are there. Africans deserve responsible governance, not only South Africa. Responsible governance is also important. So Africa deserves responsible governance as we close. And this is a call to other African nations, especially Nigeria, that is becoming the frontline name in the mouth of South Africans, that Nigeria need to work on its own governance, lay a good example, and push to the level that their countries or their citizens can stay in their country without having to run away. Governors need to create opportunity for a citizen. It is mandate that every governor of every leader took when they took up the leadership position. These are some of the issues that we think is very important. Governors need to secure their borders. And some of the things that we have seen with South Africa is that most of the border officers within the South Africa are also culpable to some of the issues that are responsible, as some of them are corrupt and they are not actually doing the right thing. The other thing is that no matter what happens, migrants deserve to be treated like human beings, not as a goat or not as an animal, the way we have seen. Perhaps the real challenge for us as we close is that choosing between security and Ubuntu. But we need to find the right balance and the policy that will help us to become the best and to do things in a way that it will really be of benefit to everybody. As I close in this episode, the question is, do we say truly that not balancing security, job, and Ubuntu is the right thing to do? South Africa needs to think about this. And more importantly, other African nations and their leaders need to begin to think about how to ensure there's good governance, there's security, and that migrants are treated like human beings, not as non-human that deserve immigration. This is the conclusion of today's episode. on Difficult Conversation in Africa. My name is Yinka Olaito. See you in the next edition. And please don't forget to always reach out to us. We are available for feedback and all of that through all our social media platforms. But you can also send us info@difficultconversationafrica.org. See you in the next edition. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. For inquiry, please send an email to info@difficultconversationafrica.org. Telephone 0809 3160591. Please follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Difficult Conversation Africa. See you soon.